The golden wheat swayed gently in the morning breeze, and a narrow stream flowed through the green fields like a silver ribbon reflecting the first light of dawn. In the middle of those peaceful lands stood a small wooden house where a poor farmer named Daniel, his loving wife Grace, and their only son Ethan lived a life full of warmth, simplicity, and quiet joy. Their little village rested in the countryside of North Carolina, wrapped in rich green hills and endless stretches of farmland. Every morning Daniel would wake before sunrise and gently run his fingers through Ethan's hair, whispering a prayer of gratitude. Grace would sit him on her lap and feed him breakfast with the tenderness only a mother could give. Then the three of them would walk together toward the landlord's fields where they worked long hours, yet they never complained because their hearts were peaceful and content. They had very little, but they never felt poor, for love made their small world feel complete. Ethan loved to run through the fields, his bare feet brushing against soft grass while he dreamed of growing up and making his parents proud. Sometimes he would tug at his father's sleeve and ask, "Papa, will we ever have our own land someday?" Daniel would only smile and lift his eyes toward the sky, as if placing his hope in God himself. But life does not always wait for dreams to ripen. One morning, Daniel and Grace boarded a bus heading to the nearby city to buy seeds and supplies for the spring crop. Ethan stayed back with his grandmother, waving goodbye from the doorway with a smile that carried no fear, unaware that it was the last time he would ever see them alive. On a sharp bend of the highway, a freight truck lost control and crashed head-on into the bus. By the time help arrived, silence had already swallowed every scream. News spread through the village faster than the wind, and by evening 2 lifeless bodies covered in white cloth were brought back home. Ethan watched everyone crying but could not understand how the world could still stand while his own had collapsed. He clung to their coffins and whispered in a trembling voice, "Take me with you, I don't want to stay here alone." The days that followed were even crueler. The landlord, who once spoke kindly to the family, showed his true face. Using forged excuses and legal tricks, he seized their small home and everything left behind. Ethan had no power to resist, only empty hands and a breaking heart. With a torn bag of clothes over his shoulder, he walked away from the only life he had ever known. He reached a crowded bus stand where tired travelers, city workers, and strangers crossed paths without noticing one another. Hungry and weak, he found a small roadside hotel and bought the cheapest plate of food he could afford. He sat in a corner, quiet and invisible, unaware that destiny had already stepped into the same place. In that unremarkable moment, when his life seemed finished, someone was about to enter his story, someone whose kindness would one day rewrite his fate. The evening was slowly settling over the roadside motel near the bus stand, and the orange glow of the setting sun stretched across the cracked pavement like fading hope. Ethan sat alone at a small metal table in the corner, pushing the food around his plate more than eating it. He didn't know where he would sleep that night, or what tomorrow would look like. The world felt too big and too empty now that he belonged nowhere. Not far from him, a well-dressed elderly man named Mr. Harrison Cole, a respected millionaire from Charlotte, had stopped by on his way back from a charity inspection in the rural districts. He noticed the thin boy sitting quietly, wearing clothes that looked several days old, his eyes tired and hollow in a way only grief can carve. Something in that small face stirred his heart. He walked toward him and gently asked if he had eaten. Ethan nodded, though he had barely taken 2 bites. The old man sat with him and spoke softly, asking about his family. At first Ethan stayed silent, afraid of strangers, but grief has a way of spilling out when kindness finally opens a door. Slowly, with trembling words, he told him everything. Mr. Cole did not interrupt, nor did he rush. He listened with the patience of a man whose heart had seen both wealth and loneliness. After a moment, he reached into his coat and offered the boy a warm drink and asked him where he planned to go tonight. Ethan lowered his eyes and whispered that he didn't know. That one sentence was enough for destiny to change its direction. The old man placed a gentle hand on his shoulder and said, "You are coming with me. No child should face the world alone." Ethan looked at him in disbelief, uncertain if this was kindness or just another illusion that would fade in the morning. But something about the calm steadiness in Mr. Cole's voice felt safe, like a door back to sunlight. They traveled together in his black SUV toward Charlotte, passing wide fields that melted into highways lit by long streams of headlights. The city rose like a shining giant in the distance, skyscrapers touching the glowing sky as if stitched to the stars. Ethan had never seen a city so alive. Cars rushed past, streetlights glittered like fallen constellations, and the warm evening wind carried scents of food, flowers, and distant jazz from a cafe across the boulevard. When they reached his mansion near the edge of a large city park, Ethan hesitated before stepping out of the car. He had never crossed a gate this beautiful before, never seen a house built like something out of a storybook. Inside, he was introduced to the housekeeper, Mrs. Parker, who greeted him with gentle eyes and a soft smile. She served him a real dinner, not the half-eaten plate he had left behind. That night, for the first time since the accident, Ethan slept in a warm room with clean sheets and a soft bed. Yet even surrounded by comfort, tears slipped silently down his face because the memory of loss still lived inside him. But grief did not chase him out of that home. Instead, kindness wrapped itself slowly around his shattered heart. Over the following weeks, Mr. Cole invited him to sit at the dining table like family, spoke to him as though he mattered, and treated him not as charity but as someone destined for dignity. He enrolled him in school, bought him new clothes and books, and reminded him every day that the past could not take away his future. Ethan worked hard, studied late, and carried his parents' memory in every success he achieved. What he didn't know yet was that this new chapter was only the beginning of a much greater journey. Years passed gently, and the wounded child who once sat alone at a bus stand slowly grew into a confident young man with purpose in his eyes and discipline in his soul. Under the care of Mr. Harrison Cole, Ethan did not just receive food and shelter, he received something far rarer: guidance, dignity, and direction. Every weekend, Mr. Cole would take him to Freedom Park in Charlotte, where towering trees cast long shadows across the pathway and children ran through the grass with laughter that sounded like sunlight. They would sit near the lake, and Mr. Cole would talk to him about choices, justice, and the difference between power and goodness. Ethan listened to every word the way a parched land absorbs rain. He studied hard, and when he reached high school he ranked among the top students in the entire district. Teachers admired his calm maturity while his classmates envied the way he never seemed shaken by life's challenges. But deep inside, he carried a memory he never once let go of: the day everything he loved was taken through cruelty disguised as authority. That pain became the reason he chose law as his future. He told Mr. Cole that he wanted to protect people who had no voice and no strength to defend themselves. The old man's heart swelled with pride the day Ethan was accepted into one of the best law schools in the state. In college, Ethan studied late into the night inside tall, echoing libraries and walked past the polished courtroom galleries during his internships, imagining himself standing there one day. He did not chase wealth or fame, he chased fairness, the kind he was denied as a child. Each success felt like a promise kept to his parents, and each step forward felt like a seed of gratitude planted for the man who had rescued him from despair. Mr. Cole grew older, and though his hair had turned the color of winter snow, his bond with Ethan only deepened. On graduation day, when the ceremony ended and crowds celebrated around them, the old man placed his hand on Ethan's shoulder and said, "You are the son I never had, and the legacy I always prayed for." Ethan had no words. Tears spoke in place of speech. He continued his journey into the legal world with determination, working as a young attorney and slowly building a reputation for fairness, intelligence, and compassion. His courtroom presence was calm but powerful, the kind that earned respect without raising a voice. Soon his cases began to make an impact across the state. Newspapers called him the young lawyer with a heart and judges praised his honesty. Years later, he was nominated and sworn in as a judge of the High Court. The courtroom rose when he stepped in wearing his robe for the very first time, and in that single moment, life revealed what mercy can create when cruelty had tried to destroy. The boy who once had nowhere to sleep now carried the responsibility of granting justice to others. He had climbed from sorrow to strength not through revenge, but through grace. He believed his past was behind him forever, until one ordinary morning a familiar name returned like a distant echo. The same landlord who had once taken everything now stood before his bench, stripped of arrogance, facing a legal dispute he could no longer escape. Fate had circled back, quietly, patiently, waiting for this moment. The courtroom was packed that morning, sunlight cutting across the polished floor through the tall glass windows as if heaven itself was watching. When the clerk announced the name of the defendant, Ethan's heartbeat slowed for a moment, not from fear, but from the weight of a memory that had once shaped his entire destiny. The man who entered, old and hunched, was the same landlord who had taken his home, his land, and the last piece of security left after his parents' death. Only now there was no pride in his step, no authority in his posture. Time had stripped him of power the way storms strip leaves from trees. He looked up and froze when he saw who sat at the bench. Ethan did not flinch. His expression remained calm, steady, and dignified. The landlord recognized him instantly and his eyes filled with disbelief and shame. The man he had thrown out as a helpless orphan now stood above him with the power to judge his fate legally, morally, and humanly. For a moment, the silence in the courtroom felt like a held breath. When Ethan spoke, his voice was firm but gentle, the kind of strength born not from anger, but from healing. He listened to the case without bitterness and treated the man exactly as he treated every other human being who came seeking justice. No revenge, no humiliation, no bitterness, only the rule of fairness. When the hearing ended, the landlord could not hold back tears. He approached him slowly, trembling, and said with a broken voice, "I wronged you when you had no one. I don't deserve your mercy. I don't deserve to stand in front of you." Ethan did not recoil or turn away. Instead he stood and answered quietly, "You took everything I had, but you never took my faith. Mercy is strength, not weakness." That day, Ethan did not punish him beyond what the law required, because his heart was not a battlefield anymore. It was a shelter that had learned what kindness can build and cruelty can never steal. The landlord left with lowered eyes, not beaten by judgment, but humbled by grace. Outside the courthouse, the wind carried the scent of green gardens from the city park nearby and sunlight spilled across the marble steps where he paused to look at the sky. Somewhere deep inside, it felt as if his parents were smiling through the clouds, proud of the man he had become. He returned home later that evening where Mr. Cole, now fragile with age, waited on the porch. Ethan knelt beside his chair and said, "Everything you taught me led me here. I owe this life to your kindness." The old man smiled softly and answered, "No son, you owe it to your heart that never turned to stone." Life had come full circle. A homeless boy saved by compassion had become a man who used compassion to save others. And in that quiet truth, the world felt gentle again. Dear viewers, if this story touched your heart, kindly leave a comment below and tell us which moment inspired you the most. Please like this video, share it with your friends, and do not forget to subscribe to the channel Kindness Quest for more beautiful and heartwarming stories.